see that sign? David Flair is my idol, it said.
That guy also has no pants on.
It's baffling to me, in retrospect, why is it that when I first started doing the classic reviews, or when I did my first ever WCW pay-per-view in 2000 review, the first one I did was Super Brawl 2000. Like, Super Brawl? Super Brawl Saturday? Why did I do that? You know, when you look at it, this week's show right here, the topic of this week's review is where I should have begun, because it was the first show of the year, right? It was the immediate fallout from Starrcade 99, and it was a grim harbinger of the truly batshit year that was to come for WCW. This show right here is the end result of perhaps the most tumultuous week in company history. I'm talking about WCW Sold Out 2000 from January 16th at the First Star Center, now the Heritage Bank Center, in Cincinnati, Ohio. This show was nominated by Nick Pelletier, Stephen Berg, and Martin Prevost over at patreon.com/wrestlingwithregret. There is a lot of ground to cover in explaining how this show came to be and why it ended up the way it was. So before we get into the show itself and talk about the matches, we have got to talk about what happened immediately after Starrcade 99. So one night after that show took place, Bret Hart vacated, then regained the WCW title in a single night, forming a new black and silver version of the New World Order with Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, Jeff Jarrett. Then later Scott Steiner faked his retirement over a back injury to join the group as well. Goldberg was set up as Bret's challenger once again for Sold Out, but he injured himself on TV after punching out a limousine window. So, who will stop the NWO's reign of terror now? I've changed the rules. I'm the commissioner now. Terry Funk is chosen by WCW management to be the new man in charge. He immediately wages war with the NWO, causing them to lose the tag title to David Flair and Crowbar, and he brings together an all-star team of himself, Arn Anderson, Paul Orndorff, and Larry Zbyszko to fight for tradition and create the Old Age Outlaws, which is just fucking unreal. Because when you do that, when you've named yourself that, not only do you immediately remind fans of the younger, more popular tandem in a different company, you've also pegged yourselves as, well, old. Oh, and by the way, they can't even keep that straight on commentary. They'll call them the New Age Outlaws in commentary at some points to really hammer home just how disorganized that whole idea is. And also, by the way, 2 of the 4 people in this group will never wrestle again. So what are we doing? So on TV, the story is that it's Sold Out. Funk is going to have Bret Hart defend his title against Sid Vicious, and Jeff Jarrett, who is the U.S. champion, will take on Chris Benoit in 3 separate matches of the pay-per-view for the U.S. title. However, things are secretly chaotic as hell behind the scenes. Well, not so secret now in hindsight, but as we all know, in that match with Bret and Goldberg at Starrcade, Bret's kicked in the head, he suffers a concussion. Bret attempts to work through the injury for the next several weeks, but it causes him more harm and forces him to vacate the belt and eventually retire. Scott Hall is off TV injured again. Scott Steiner still recovering from his injury. That's all bad enough. But then on the Go Home Nitro, in an effort to, I guess, help sell people on Jeff Jarrett wrestling 3 matches in a single night with Chris Benoit at the pay-per-view, they're going to put Jarrett in 3 separate matches in a single night on Nitro. Sounds smart. Jeff takes on a series of mystery opponents who represent the old guard, like George the Animal Steel, Tito Santana, and Jimmy Snuka, all those WCW vanguards of old. In the last match with Snuka, it's in a steel cage, and at the end we've got Snuka and Benoit taking turns diving off the cage onto Jarrett. What a beautiful moment between 2 murderers. But it was also Benoit's headbutt that ended up concussing Jeff Jarrett, so now he's out of the pay-per-view as well. And so, in a matter of weeks, 4 of your matches on this pay-per-view are now severely compromised by injury. So how do they make up for this? How is WCW going to rectify the situation? As the story goes, the final straw in the first Vince Russo era of WCW came when Russo suggested they have a battle royal to crown a new champion and nominated Tank Abbott to win the thing.
Get that fat duck ass out here!
The blowback to this suggestion was WCW finally having enough and saying that Vince Russo would no longer be the sole creative person in charge, and now there would be a booking committee, which Vince Russo did not like. That was not part of the deal when he signed on to WCW, and so he decided to leave in protest and sit at home for a while, which was certainly his right, and that's why Vince Russo's not at this show. But now there exists this big vacuum as to who is in charge and who's going to take up that spot. It is a very competitive spot, surprisingly. Ultimately, Kevin Sullivan, who at this point is in the middle of a Varsity Club reboot, wow, such forward thinking, regains power as head booker in WCW, but that's not met well by a lot of the wrestlers in the back. So now you've got like dozens of wrestlers who are apparently threatening or planning to threaten to ask for their release should this go through. And it's not just the four you know about. There are so many more than that. There's Shane Douglas, there's Juventud Guerrera, Conan, Kidman, Rey Mysterio, so many other wrestlers besides the Radicals, as they would come to be known, that won out. Now, ultimately, a lot of them would back off because they've had a fear of job security. Some were talked down and told they would get a nice push if they stuck around. And now, of course, there are still some holdouts who are planning on leaving as a result of Sullivan regaining the booking power. And you're going to see a few of those guys in action tonight, one of whom in the main event. Needless to say, all the backstage goings-on are far more fascinating than what's happening with the on-air product, because, oh yeah, it's still garbage at this time, let's not forget. 14,132 folks in the arena. It was reported that nearly half of this crowd was papered, but it's a vocal crowd nonetheless. 115,000 pay-per-view buys, one of the highest numbers they'll do all year. There's no opening hype package. It's probably all out of date anyway. We begin with Tony Schiavone, Mike Tenay, and Bobby Heenan on commentary, and Schiavone and Tenay explain that the whole card is being adjusted due to the injuries sustained by Bret Hart and Jeff Jarrett. Now, instead of Benoit versus Jarrett in 3 matches for the U.S. title and Bret versus Sid for the WCW title, we now have Benoit versus Sid for the vacant title. Heenan, furiously looking through his notes as Schiavone and Tenay keep explaining just what the fuck has happened, is truly giving me strength. It's a great moment here. They show a pre-show segment where the Revolution beats up Conan. They've been attacking the Filthy Animals a lot in recent weeks. We then get some match graphics, and man, these are bad. They explain that the Triple Threat Theater, the 3 separate matches that was supposed to have Benoit and Jarrett, will still go on, but now it's going to be Billy Kidman of the Filthy Animals wrestling 3 different members of Revolution. He's going to wrestle Dean Malenko first in a catch-as-catch-can match, then you got Perry Saturn in a bunkhouse brawl, and a mystery opponent in a caged heat match later on. They toss to another pre-show segment where David Flair and Crowbar beat up Vampiro. Vamp was meant to challenge for the tag belt to a mystery partner, but now instead Vampiro wants them both by himself, and it turns into a 3-way dance. Why not? They're running down the whole card now, and boy, I have never been less excited for a pay-per-view. My favorite part about all this, besides the shot of Heenan looking through his notes, is at the end of that, after they're all done and they go to the entrance for the very next match, you hear Mike Tenay go, "We did it!" Like, yes, what a self-congratulatory moment for the announcers here, going through for the first like 5 minutes of this show, trying to explain just how fucking nuts everything has gone and trying to stay as professional as they can. My heart goes out to them for sure. Your first match of the show is part 1 of the Triple Threat Theater. It's billed as a catch-as-catch-can match as Kidman takes on the Revolution's Dean Malenko. Now, the Revolution, which is Malenko, Saturn, formerly Chris Benoit, all led by Shane Douglas, they've recently been doing this whole anti-America angle as of late. Like, they're fighting with Jim Duggan and trying to get him to renounce America while they're simultaneously fighting the Filthy Animals. Now, the rules for this matchup are if you leave the ring, if your feet touch the floor, you lose. This was originally meant to be a dungeon match when it was Benoit versus Jarrett, and the idea was there were going to be no ropes. And I'm just going to say right now, that sounds way more boring than the original dungeon match from Fully Loaded 98. Some early back and forth graps here. Kidman gets some punches in. Malenko instinctively powders out of the ring, which means that after some confusion, the match is over. Well then. My God, there is nothing more emblematic of what a shit show WCW is turning into than them opening with a match on pay-per-view where the participants can't even remember the stipulation. I mean, this was an honest mistake, by Malenko here. It's what you do early in the match. You take the heat early on, you powder, you catch your breath, and that's what you do. So I'm not upset with Malenko. I don't blame him for what he did here, but in the moment, yeah, if those ropes are still up, like maybe if the ropes were down, they could have remembered, oh, don't leave the ring. But when you're in that mode, those mistakes happen. But it here happened on pay-per-view, and you've already changed up so much of the card due to circumstance already. So what's one more? This feels like very much a symbol, very symbolic, King, of just what the company's going through at this time. And it's hard to believe this is Dean Malenko's last match in WCW. We got Mean Gene Okerlund in the promo zone with Vampiro. When he's asked if he can beat Flair and Crowbar at the same time, suddenly Masahiro Chono shows up. He yells something in Japanese, and we don't see him the rest of the show. What the hell was that? Then we get another promo with David Flair, Crowbar, and Daphne. They so crazy.
I'm gonna break his bones. And I'm gonna rip his flesh.
And I'm gonna pick clean what's left over.
Our next match is billed as a three-way dance, though it's technically a triple threat as Vampiro takes on David, Flair, and Crowbar. Like I mentioned, Flair and Crowbar are the current WCW Tag Team Champions. What happened was, at the start of the year, Scott Hall was injured, and so he and Kevin Nash's tag belts were held up, and they had a lethal lottery tournament on Nitro to see who the new champions would be. As this episode is going on, David Flair meets Crowbar for the first time as Crowbar works as a gas station attendant. And so that union is made. They make it all the way to the finals of the lethal lottery, and Arn Anderson, who is Flair's godfather, screws the NWO out of the titles and allows Flair and Crowbar to win them. Dreams do come true. The tag champs working together in this every man for himself match. Vamp and Crowbar doing the bulk of the work here to protect David and his lack of experience. Those two at least are looking good. Flair's chops seem to have no effect, so Crowbar wants a turn, but he takes a spinning heel kick. Vamp chops back. Vampiro and David on the outside. Crowbar planches onto both of them. Follows up with a big splash off the apron onto Vampiro. Flair still moves like a baby deer learning how to walk. We get a top deck superplex by Vampiro. Crowbar even using his tag partner as a weapon against their opponent. Crowbar and Vampiro go for the old Kidman counter, but they don't quite pull it off. They get a "you fucked up" chant. Vampiro makes up for it by dropping Flair on his head to the fans' delight. God, this match just keeps on going. It feels like these three are making it up as they go along. David goes to the figure four and it looks like crap. Crowbar hits a flying move. The camera kind of misses, but Flair breaks up the pin. Daphne comes in and gives David a smooch. We get the roll up. That still isn't the finish. Vamp outsmarts David and Daph, hits the finisher on David, and the match is finally over. I give it 1 star out of 5. There were some fun moments in that matchup. I don't think all of them were meant to be intentional. And there were some times here as I'm watching, like I said, it feels like they're just kind of like waiting for the next thing to happen. They're making it up as they go. I wonder if they were told, hey, you gotta add and pad some time here because this last match went way shorter than what we allotted. So maybe do some more moves. Crowbar, do some more dives. And that's basically what we got here. You know, it was just crazy. Again, they're trying to make the best out of a bad situation. I find it hard to believe that there was nobody that could have put Vampiro with that was available. Like, why was Chono showing up at the end of that thing? We never hear from him again. So I don't understand why he popped in there. You know, I hope he got paid well for his quick trip to and from the US. Buff Bagwell entering the arena. He'll be taking on DDP later tonight. Elsewhere, Mean Gene's with the Mamalukes, Disco Inferno, and Tony Marinara. Disco is their reluctant helper because he owes the family money, evidently. The future Tony Mamaluke immediately leaves. Not bad for a day's work. Can Big Vito and Johnny the Bull take on the Harris boys? They say they're confident and they're telling Disco he'd better have their back. So we go to that match now as the Harris boys take on the Mamalukes. The Harris boys, formerly Creative Control, working for the powers that be, but soon after Starrcade, that storyline was abandoned. Vince Russo would not come back on air in any capacity until April, so the Harrises are on their own now. Johnny the Bull with some quick moves on Don or Ron to start things off. I guess the one with a Titan logo on his tank top is Ron Harris, according to Shivani, which kind of kills my joke for the rest of this matchup. But I will say his explanation as to how he could tell them apart, I think, is pretty subtle and pretty brilliant.
It's all in the tattoos.
Vito with some very interesting theatrics before bringing the elbow down to Ron's groin. Don beats up Johnny on the outside for a bit, which allows the twins to take over. Ron with a blatant low blow to Johnny a couple minutes later, but the Bull remains resilient. Vito pressuring Disco to get involved on the outside, but Glenn looks conflicted. The twins go for a double pile driver, but the Mamalukes escape. Disco gets up and tries to cost Vito the match, but inadvertently helps them win. Oopsie! I'm gonna give it 1.5 stars out of 5. I thought the match was just okay, although I am confused by the finish. Why would Disco Inferno so blatantly try and cost his own guys the match, considering that he is supposedly, you know, on the hook with his family and threatened to be killed over some gambling debts? Madusa's having a chat with Spice backstage. She says she's had enough of Oklahoma, 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 Oklahoma. It's the Cruiserweight Championship match. Are you ready, kids? You've got Made in the USA Madusa defending against Oklahoma, aka writer Ed Ferrara doing a Jim Ross impersonation. He's no longer contorting his face to look as if he has Bell's palsy, for the most part at least, and boy, he and Russo are just copying their own homework at this point because Oklahoma is doing the exact same misogynist gimmick that Jeff Jarrett did in the WWF in '99 before leaving for WCW. So who stands up for women but the current Cruiserweight champion in Madusa? The one-time Alundra Blaze is finally given a here damn championship once it becomes clear they're never making a women's title. In the week leading up to this big match, Oklahoma single-handedly beat up Asia Asia and Madusa, and that whole segment was weird as hell because Madusa was just not dressed for the occasion. It was not fitting the vibe. Madusa rocking her patriotic outfit here. Hard to believe this woman who used to have wars with Bull Nakano's got to carry Ferrara in a pay-per-view match. He is clearly blown from 3 hair mares, and that's not a work, folks. We got a funny spot, though, where Oklahoma dodges the corner attack, but not quite. It's really the highlight of the whole match. Madusa with a second rope drop kick. Another missile drop kick. She goes for a third, and I think Oklahoma holds onto the ropes, and Madusa misses. It's a bad angle. He's got the barbecue sauce, folks. You know what's coming up next. Spice, the former Nitro girl, takes it from him, though. Asia comes back and helps her beat Oklahoma up. It is a total beatdown on the outside. The referee's just sitting here letting it all go. Back in the ring, Oklahoma tries to pants Madusa to distract her. Not the worst roll-up I've ever seen. Oklahoma is the new Cruiserweight champion. God help us all. The ladies beat him up after the match and sauce him. Oh yeah, Madusa's really hung up on losing her title. Fuck me. This one here, folks, is a negative 5-star dandy because holy shit, what can you say about this matchup here? I mean, I guess you got to give credit to Oklahoma for not tripping on himself during the course of this matchup. I think it's the least you could ask of from him. But what do Vince Russo and Ed Ferrara think? That this is compelling television? This is going to get fans to watch? We just saw this non-wrestler beat up Madusa, who's got this actual pedigree to her name and everything, and beats her for a championship. So now you've completely made, if people didn't already have a bad enough opinion for whatever reason of Madusa winning the Cruiserweight Championship, then Oklahoma winning it is definitely going to bury it. You might as well throw it in the trash of the TV Championship at this point, because that's the kind of care you are showing it at this point. And I don't know how any self-respecting WCW fan, an existing one at least, can look at this and go, oh man, this is just my shit. Mean Gene's backstage with Brian Knobbs with 1B. BK showing love to his mentor Finlay, says he will destroy Meng and Smiley in the next match. Then he'll beat Finlay into a coma because the student will become the master. Honestly, it's a pretty kick-ass promo. On we go now to a match for the hard way for the Hardcore Championship. Brian Knobbs defends against Finlay, Norman Smiley, and the man called Meng. He's the man called Meng. One notable thing about the build for this matchup is that on the Monday before the show, Knobbs and Finlay beat the hell out of each other backstage in a segment that doesn't even make air and had to be pushed to Thunder in highlight form. That's just a great use of their time. Then on that same episode of Thunder, Knobbs actually beats Norman Smiley for the Hardcore Championship in the parking lot. So here's a question for you. Which came first? Was it Brian Knobbs and Finlay's homage to New Jack, or the Dudley Boys' homage to New Jack? Because right around the same time here, I think it's actually the Dudley Boys who do it first. At the end of December in '99, the Dudleys debut their brand new camo look, the colored camo, that blue look, which eventually becomes red and white and black, and they have a gray and white and black as well. But then right after they debut that look, you see Knobbs and Finlay also change their outfits. Because, Brian Knobbs, he was wearing the Nasty Boys outfit for a long time. Now he's got a very similar getup. He's teaming with Finlay, who also has a very similar getup. Something tells me that there was a little bit of cheating and looking over somebody's notes from one side or the other, but I think it was the Dudleys who did it first. Maybe I'm wrong. Let me know in the comments if I am. Norman nervously dinks Meng in the head, which of course has no effect. Meng kicks the can right into Norman's face, and down he goes. Brilliant. Norman continues to get the hell beat out of him, screaming all the while. It's just a chaotic brawl here. Bobby Heenan says time to get out the cops with the hoses. Knobbs is thrown through a table set up on the outside. Smiley and Finlay fight into the crowd. Norman is once again outmatched. Knobbs is knocked out by something off camera. Norman re-enters the ring, sees that now is his time. It's the Big Wiggle. He gets blasted with a riot shield in midair, though. Knobbs wins and retains the championship. I give it 2 stars out of 5, mostly on the strength of Norman Smiley's selling throughout this, because he was just a joy to watch. I tell you what, looking at the people in this match, this is probably the most competent, technically sound brawl, hardcore style you're gonna get, given how all 4 of these guys are objectively good workers. It's now time for part 2 of Triple Threat Theater. It's a bunkhouse brawl as Kidman takes on Perry Saturn. The match starts out pretty academic for what's billed as a no disqualification match. Holy crap, what a springboard by Saturn over the ropes and that collision into Kidman. Saturn showing off more of the agility here, wearing down Kidman, ripping his shirt and using it to throw him across the ring. Kidman keeps kicking out though, even from a big-ass elbow drop. You know the old saying, you don't powerbomb Kidman unless you go for it twice. Saturn goes for the moonsault but doesn't connect. Kidman makes his comeback, but he is caught and suplexed out of the ring and through a table that was set up earlier, and whoa, Kidman's head just barely catching the edge of the apron. That looked scary. Saturn and Kidman go for a big something off the top rope. Saturn goes for the powerbomb again, but it proves costly as Kidman hits the facebuster for the win. I give it 3 stars out of 5. I think it's the best match of the night so far, I would say, although it's still not a fantastic match, nothing really special. I think that, especially compared to the previous match they just had, this one doesn't really take advantage of the no disqualification angle to it, as much, although like I said, we just had a bunch of crazy stuff happen in the previous match, so you don't want 2 in a row that are like that. I think that still Saturn and Kidman made the best of their environment, and once again, you gotta give Kidman props because it's not the first time he has worked multiple matches to help buoy an otherwise bad WCW pay-per-view. Well, a couple of weeks ago, Harlem Heat imploded. Stevie Ray was out with an injury for a while, and during that time, Booker T began to flourish as a single star, began working with a mysterious woman named Midnight, who actually had a cool entrance. She just teleported into the ring after the lights cut out. Stevie comes back and does not like what he sees, so Stevie fights Booker and Midnight to see if Midnight gets a stay in the group. Booker and Midnight win, so Stevie immediately betrays Book. We go to a promo video where Stevie Ray is back in the hood. He's hanging out with old friends, calling out Booker T and accusing him of forgetting his roots, saying he forgot where he came from. He says Booker T turned his back on the hood, so he's turned his back on his brother. Right after that, Mean Gene is in the promo zone with Stevie Ray. Okay, 2 promos in a row, good for him. Stevie tells Gene this is going to hurt him a lot more than it'll hurt Booker. We go to that match now, brother versus brother, Booker T versus Stevie Ray. Booker's on the mic saying it's Stevie who forgets where he came from and that Midnight's got his back now. Booker is off to a fast start, but Stevie puts up the elbow and turns Booker inside out with a clothesline. Booker fights back on the outside, but is overpowered once again. Booker hits the axe kick, the spinneroonie, and the bookend, but then who shows up but Ahmed Johnson? Big T. He runs in and attacks Booker. The match ends in a DQ. Stevie with the slapjack on Booker. Big T with the Pearl River plunge as Midnight shows up at ringside and looks on. Big T calling Midnight a piece of fish.
You kill your black family for a piece of fish.
I give it 1 star out of 5. It's a pretty forgettable and not very interesting, first time brother versus brother matchup here, but it's one of those angles disguised as a match kind of things, I feel, where, of course, the big story, the big hook is at the end. You've got, Big T, the former Ahmed Johnson debuting. We actually got some Ahmed chants by the fans when he showed up. And, he's looking not in his prime shape. He's a lot bigger than he was when he was in the WWF, but it's interesting to see him here. He will be the other half of Harlem Heat 2000 with Stevie Ray, but that union will not last long. MGO backstage with SID, who looks conflicted, confused. He says he and Chris Benoit are going to throw their friendship out the window with the world title on the line. On we go to what's billed as a shoot fight, so great. So that means everything else is fake? As Tank Abbott takes on Jerry Flynn. These 2 uncharismatic wonders with legitimate fighting backgrounds have been scrapping the last couple of weeks. It actually ended up last week with the 2 of them getting arrested and thrown into the same very darkly lit holding cell together. What broke-ass jail is this? There's no lights on here for them to put them in a jail, and they only have 1 cell to put them in. They're trading blows in the corner right away. Abbott picks his opponent up and just throws him down. Flynn with some big kicks, then the 2 end up on the mat. Abbott using his strength once again. He lays Mr. JF out with a couple of punches. The last couple actually connect. Flynn does not answer the 10 count, and Abbott wins this very short match. I give it a half star out of 5, and the only reason it's that high is because I don't give quarter stars. It's crazy. Every time I think about this time period, and every time I read about it or hear about it, we really were a heartbeat away from Tank Abbott being the world champion. Give me David Arquette twice. Up next, a no-rules match as Diamond Dallas Page takes on Buff Bagwell. This is a very personal rivalry here because the story is Buff has been accused of hitting on DDP's wife, Kimberly. And apparently this all went down while DDP was out in Los Angeles filming Ready to Rumble, so he wasn't there to witness any of this. Hasn't this movie ruined enough lives already? But evidently this was a worked angle where they tried to pass off as real, a case of WCW trying to work the boys, as it were. Not sure if that's great for company morale. In the promos leading up to this, DDP is all like, the ladies love Bagwell. However, so do the guys. Oh, snap? The fight begins and soon makes its way to the outside. They're fighting into a blocked off area of seating and both just fall into an abyss for a few seconds. They make their way back into the ring. DDP hits a clothesline, sending them both back out. They fight into the web zone and Tony Schiavone saying, WCW.com is really gonna get WCWI. Like what? Each man grabs a monitor and they smash them together. Page is laid out on the desk. Buff climbs up the set and hits an elbow drop through it. That was amazing. Buff taking DDP to DKC, but Page follows up with ring post-itis. We had a couple of double downs and 10 counts. By the way, that is the stipulation for this match. It's a last man standing. But when referee Slick Johnson's doing the counts, he's playing to the crowd like he's Frank Drebin as the umpire in Naked Gun. He's barely paying attention to who he's counting for. Buff's got a riot baton now and clubs DDP with it. Page barely gets up in time and falls back into Buff to hit the Diamond Cutter. Kimberly comes out as both men are being counted down. Buff's able to get up first despite being hit with a finishing move, and he wins. DDP is able to get back up though. He beats Buff up with the baton and he walks out with Kimberly. So he loses, but he also wins. I'll give it 3.5 stars out of 5. I think this was probably my pick for the match of the night. Sometimes overly scripting your matches can be a good thing, it turns out. I did the finish was a little silly. Like, I don't understand how Buff got up faster than DDP, even though he was hit with the finisher. And I thought the referee getting so into it by the end with the counts and the way he kept just jumping up and down from the floor to the apron to do it, I thought was really awkward. But as far as like the nuts and bolts of it and what Buff and DDP actually did, I think it was some of the best work you'll see all night. It's the final act of Triple Threat Theater, Caged Heat, as Kidman takes on a mystery opponent. It's the debut of this big-ass cage for WCW, very Heck-in-a-Sec-like. The perpetually injured Shane Douglas of the Revolution brings out Kidman's opponent. It's the Wall, brother, acting as a hired gun for the Revolution. The cage door is closed and Kidman's off to the races. He grabs a chair from under the ring and strikes Wall, but Wall fights back and punches the chair into Billy's face. Wall goes up top, but Kidman drop kicks him in midair. Wall's just toying with his opponent, throwing Kidman into the cage wall. You gotta love when the crowd's reacting loudly to something completely unrelated to the match, because that happens here. We get a big top rope sunset flip by Kidman. We also find out here, apparently you don't chokeslam Kidman either, well, unless you go for it twice. Wall wins with Wily Will. Wow. I give it 2 stars out of 5. I think it was a good showing. If you don't include the first match of Triple Threat Theater, I think between the second and third matches, Kidman is just working his ass off here. I love how much he bumps for the Wall to make Wall look good, but I think the fact that he also has these moments of hope and they are so believable, I think makes the match a little bit better. So even in defeat, I think Kidman looking pretty strong here, especially when you consider, hey, he wrestled two or 1.5 matches before this. In your semi-main event, it's a hardcore brawls match as the Commissioner Terry Funk takes on the NWO's Kevin Nash. If Funk wins, the NWO is disbanded, but if Kevin Nash wins, then he becomes the Commissioner after tonight. It begins with Nash and Funk fighting on the outside. Nash grabs a chair and dinks Funk so hard he swears a lot. Motherfucking sons of bitches. Then Nash with a jackknife powerbomb through the announce desk. Nash on the microphone and tells Funk he's got a lot of heart and tells him he can keep the commissionership if he just crawls into the ring. After a long time, Terry finally crawls in and Nash says he's a lying son of a bitch. Aw, you stinker. Nash with repeated chair shots to the back, but a bloody Terry Funk fights back. The fans are now booing Terry, the babyface. More swears by Terry, but Nash with repeated dinks to the head. Funk sort of stops selling as he fights back here. We get repeated headbutts now. Funk setting up some sort of chair structure in the middle of the ring, but Nash hits a low blow. The powerbomb to Funk through the chairs, the cover, and the win for Nash, the new commissioner. I give it 1.5 stars out of 5. I'll say this, Terry Funk is a hell of a seller, man. Very few people can sell head trauma like him, or just, getting beat up in general like him. And I think his fire and his comeback and everything kind of helped elevate the match for me a little bit. I think that, Terry Funk, boy, what a tough man to be taking the abuse that he does in this match, from all the headshots to the power bombs, the multiple power bombs, one through a table, one into some chairs. I mean, that dude was tough. Absolutely. And so, all hail your new commissioner, I guess. Scott Hudson backstage in the promo zone with Arn Anderson, who's the guest referee in the main event. He's holding the world title there. Arn is very shell-shocked here after what happened with Terry Funk. He even has a rare stumble over how dire the situation is with Nash in charge. But Arn says, as the guest referee tonight, there will be no losers, only winners. Well, I mean, there kind of has to be a winner and a loser for this matchup here. That's Generally how wrestling works. In your very hastily rebooked main event for the vacant WCW Championship, Chris Benoit takes on Sid Vicious. So, as I mentioned, Chris Benoit is one of the many wrestlers threatening to leave WCW over Kevin Sullivan being promoted back to head of creative. You might recall, these two have a history, because the last time Sullivan was the head booker, he booked his own wife, Woman, into an angle where she would cheat on him for Chris Benoit, and then, wouldn't you know it, life imitated art. So, understandably so, there is some animosity between these two parties here. But in a very surprising move, Sullivan, offering an olive branch, as it were, offering the belt to Benoit in order to help him possibly stay in the company. So let's see how that turns out. Benoit gets the Orange Cassidy pyro treatment for his entrance. Michael Buffer doing the intros here, calling Benoit Master of the Crippler. He refers to Sid as a former WCW champion. He is not that yet. Arn, the referee, giving the instructions for the two men, telling them to give them a fight that the world and the folks in Cincinnati deserve. Sid's able to shrug off Benoit in the early going. Then all of a sudden we see Saturn and David Flair hanging out on the stage. Oh wait, it's actually the rest of the locker room coming out to look on. I was very confused for a second. Well, now I know how some people probably felt seeing me on the hard cam during the main event of Final Battle 2021. Sid keeps throwing his weight around as the fans chant his name. Both guys are faces here, but Sid gets a little bit more pop. Benoit fighting back and going for the leg, squishing it between the steps and the ring post. The figure four is applied, but Sid reverses the pressure. Benoit with an Indian deathlock for a bit, continuing to attack the legs. Sid begins to sit up and fires up against Benoit. Sounds like the bell rings for no reason mid-match.
Shoots him in.
Benoit ducking the line, hits a German. Sid answers with a power slam. We get another German. Benoit goes up, hits the flying headbutt. Still not enough to put Sid away as he catches Chris in a big-ass choke slam. We get the cover, but Benoit's foot is under the ropes, and so the pinfall's broken. Benoit catching Sid in the crossface. Sid taps immediately. Sid's foot also under the rope, but Arn misses it and calls the match. Benoit is the winner and the new WCW champion for a little less than 12 hours. I give it 2.5 stars out of 5. I think that considering all the circumstances going into this matchup and just everything that led to this cursed main event, I think Sid and Benoit did the best that they could. I think it was a fine, big versus little, face versus face match as well. Also very difficult to maneuver around, but I think those two did it fairly well. Again, it's very big of Kevin Sullivan to, offer this to Benoit, this peace offering here. And they say that, another idea they had was that, let's actually have Kevin Nash win the belt at the end, so he'll have the commissionership and the championship. But Nash, evidently, he's part of the booking committee with Sullivan, and he didn't want that extra heat. Not that it matters, because Nash will become champion and commissioner within like a week from now, after all the confusion, because Benoit is going to not take this as a peace offering. He wins the belt, but then he's like, no, I'm still going to leave, bye. And so then the championship is vacated once again. And I get the mentality of Sullivan choosing Benoit for this, because if you just kind of listen to the internet talk, if you go by that, and also listen to the fan reactions, Benoit is very deserving at this point. He is very much one of those guys that a lot of fans had rallied around and wanted to be in that upper position for so long. And so for a fleeting moment, you get a glimpse of that. Also, it's a pretty smart way to end that match, kind of hedging their bets here by leaving just enough doubt and just enough controversy with that final call with Arn missing Sid's foot under the ropes that it would allow for something to happen as some kind of contingency should, for example, Benoit not accept the belt as a peace offering and then walks away from the company 24 hours later. After the match, we get a backstage interview with Benoit and Mean Gene. Benoit talks about how far he's come since going to his first wrestling show at age 11 in Edmonton and seeing the Dynamite Kid in action. Arn Anderson shows up, paying his respects to the new champion, but then in comes the commissioner-elect Kevin Nash, who says at the stroke of midnight, the NWO will make Benoit's life a living hell and apologizes for dropping a turd in the punch bowl. So, what are Chris Benoit's final words as a WCW star?
Well, from the little turd to the big turd, best of luck.
My final grade for WCW Sold Out 2000, aka the real beginning of the end, is an F. For fuck, what a terrible show this was. I get it on one hand, because WCW, their hands were tied in a lot of respects when it came to two of their top stars getting injured. There are a couple of things, though, I think they could have done to prevent those injuries from happening. I think there's things they could have done to prevent some of the booking from kind of falling the way it did here. And I will give WCW a bunch of leniency, and again, give them a handicap for doing what they had to do to try and throw something together here at like the last minute. Because all these changes happen between Thunder and the pay-per-view. There's nothing they can do on TV to explain away any of this. And so I give them a little bit of leniency on that. But even then, just the matches they had, like the matches, many of them weren't that great, and the finishes on so many of the matches just didn't make sense and were maddening. And it's hard to watch, but I take a little bit of solace in knowing that by the end of the year, WCW will still be bad, but damn it, they're trying. Of course, the big gold belt would not be enough to keep Chris Benoit in WCW, and by the next day, it would be he, Perry Saturn, Dean Malenko, and Eddie Guerrero who would ultimately be the ones to walk from WCW. And a couple weeks later, they would make their debut in the WWF on a very pivotal episode of Raw, and that is how the Radicals were born. And in 2 weeks' time, that is where our story is going to take us when I look at WWF No Way Out 2000. But what do you think of this review for Sold Out 2000? Let me know in the comments section below. Give the video a thumbs up if you like it. Hit that subscribe button and the bell icon to get all the notifications. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.